Welcome to Furious HOA Karens. I did not raise my voice, I raised my receipts. You are going to stop acting like a victim. Allison Drake screamed that management agreed with her, and that was the end of the conversation. She slammed her clipboard against the metal mailbox cluster hard enough that the sound echoed across the parking lot. I stood there in my brown hoodie with the hood up, rain dripping off the fabric, holding my small notepad with pages so wet the ink had started to blur. This was Lakeview Heights Homeowners Association in Omaha, Nebraska, and my neighborhood reputation was about to get shredded because Allison had decided I was a thief. 2 hours earlier, someone had posted a blurry security clip in the neighborhood app, showing a figure near the mailboxes holding what might have been a package. Allison insisted it was me without letting anyone zoom in or enhance the image. She claimed the timestamp matched when I usually got home from my systems analyst job downtown. She also claimed I was a repeat offender, using unrelated old complaints from the portal about my trash bins being out past pickup hours, and a noise complaint from a party I did not even throw. Now she was threatening an immediate tow against my car as punishment. She waved a bright yellow notice in my face, already filled out with my unit number and vehicle description. The tow company name was printed at the top in bold letters, and Allison had signed it herself as board vice president. She told me the truck was on its way and I had 15 minutes to move my car off HOA property or pay the impound fee myself. I asked her what proof she had that I stole anything. She tapped the clipboard and said, "I do not make the rules, I enforce them." I pulled out my phone and started recording. Allison immediately lunged forward and tried to grab it, but I stepped back and kept the lens on her. She yelled that recording without permission was harassment, and she would add it to my violation file. I told her I was standing in a common area and had every right to document what she was saying. She turned to a neighbor who had stopped to watch and said loudly that I had been caught on camera stealing packages and she was protecting the community. The neighbor looked uncomfortable and walked away without saying anything. Allison pulled a handheld radio from her coat pocket and pressed the button. She spoke into it like she was dispatch, asking for a patrol to swing by the mailbox cluster because a resident was being confrontational. No one answered. She repeated the call twice, then clipped the radio back on her belt and told me the patrol was on the way. I knew for a fact that Lakeview Heights did not have security patrols. We had a private management company that handled violations, but there was no roaming guard. Allison was performing. She opened the clipboard and showed me a printed complaint form with my address at the top. The form listed 3 separate incidents: missing packages reported by 2 neighbors, a damaged mailer found near my parking spot, and the blurry footage from that morning. At the bottom, Allison had added a note in her own handwriting claiming I had been seen loitering near the mailboxes after hours. I asked her when that happened. She said it was in the notes and I should have checked the portal. I logged into the portal on my phone right there in front of her. There was no notice, no email, no warning about an investigation. Allison watched me scroll and said the system was slow and I probably had not refreshed. I refreshed 3 times. Nothing. I turned the screen toward her and asked her to show me where the notice was. She waved her hand dismissively and said the portal was not the official record. Her minutes were the official record. I asked to see the minutes. She said they were not public until the quarterly meeting. I told her I wanted to appeal. Allison smiled and said I could submit a written appeal to the management office by 5 that evening, but the appeal had to include a notarized statement and a processing fee. I asked where that requirement was listed. She tapped the clipboard again and said it was in the updated enforcement guidelines from last month. I asked for a copy. She said copies were available at the clubhouse during business hours, but the office closed at 4:30 and it was already 4:15. The management office had a walk-in cutoff in 30 minutes, and I was standing in a parking lot with no car access because she had threatened the tow. Allison turned and started walking toward the clubhouse. I followed her and asked what happened to the stolen items. She stopped and spun around so fast I nearly ran into her. She said the items were being held as evidence and I was not allowed to see them. I asked who reported them stolen. She said that was confidential. I asked if there was a police report. She said the HOA handled internal matters internally and only involved police when necessary. I asked what made this not necessary. She ignored me and kept walking. Inside the clubhouse lobby, Allison walked straight to the management office window. The receptionist looked up, and Allison immediately launched into a rapid-fire explanation about a theft investigation and a resident who refused to cooperate. She said I was demanding records I had no right to, and she needed the office to print an official violation notice on HOA letterhead so I could not claim I was never warned. The receptionist glanced at me, then back at Allison, and said the office did not print violation notices without a board vote. Allison slammed her hand on the counter and said she was the vice president, and this was an emergency enforcement action. The receptionist did not flinch. She said the office could log a complaint, but any towing or access suspension required a written request from the board president, not the vice president. Allison pulled the radio out again and made another fake call, this time claiming she needed backup for a hostile resident situation. The receptionist watched her with a flat expression and said nothing. Allison clipped the radio back and told the receptionist she would escalate this to the management company directly. The receptionist said that was her right and handed Allison a complaint form. I asked the receptionist if I could file a counter-complaint. She nodded and handed me the same form. Allison turned and stared at me, then said loudly that filing a false complaint was a violation in itself, and she would make sure I was fined for wasting HOA resources. I ignored her and started filling out the form. I wrote that Allison had accused me of theft without evidence, threatened my vehicle, and refused to provide documentation of the violation process. I signed it and handed it back. The receptionist stamped it with a date stamp and said it would be reviewed within 10 business days. Allison laughed. She said 10 business days was too late because the board was voting to suspend my access to common areas tomorrow night. I asked when that meeting was. She said it was a closed session and I was not invited. I asked if closed sessions were allowed under the bylaws. She said emergency sessions were allowed and this was an emergency. I asked what made it an emergency. She said theft was always an emergency and the board had the authority to act immediately to protect residents. I left the clubhouse and walked back to my unit. My car was still in the parking spot, untowed, but there was now a bright yellow notice tucked under the wiper. I pulled it out and read it. The notice said my vehicle was parked in violation of guest parking rules and I had 24 hours to move it or face a fine and tow. My assigned spot was 10 feet away. The notice was signed by Allison and dated that afternoon. She had written the wrong violation on purpose, knowing I would have to spend time fighting it instead of focusing on the theft accusation. Inside my unit, I opened my laptop and pulled up every email, portal message, and delivery confirmation I had from the past 3 months. I worked as a systems analyst, so tracking data was second nature. I found the delivery notifications for every package I had received. None of them matched the dates Allison had listed on her complaint form. I also found a video clip from my own doorbell camera showing me arriving home the morning of the so-called theft. The timestamp was 20 minutes after the blurry footage from the mailbox cluster, and I was clearly holding my work bag with both hands, no packages. I saved everything to a cloud folder and sent a link to my neighbor Marcus, who lived 2 units down. Marcus had been complaining about Allison for months. She had fined him twice for leaving his trash bins out past noon on pickup day, even though the truck did not come until 2 in the afternoon. He told me he was tired of her selective enforcement and he had been keeping his own records. He texted back within 5 minutes and said he had footage from his dashcam that showed someone else near the mailboxes that morning, but he was terrified of retaliation and refused to be seen on camera at first. I called the management company directly and asked to speak to the property manager. The receptionist transferred me, and I explained the situation. The property manager, a woman named Diane, listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said she had not received any board request for an emergency session and no authorization for a tow. She also said Allison did not have the authority to issue violation notices on her own. I asked if she could send that in writing. She said she would email the board president and copy me. If you are enjoying this chaos, hit the like button and subscribe, because this story is about to get even wilder. 20 minutes later, I got the email. Diane confirmed that no emergency session had been scheduled and no towing authorization had been submitted. She also said the complaint form I filed would be reviewed, but the 10-day timeline was standard and could not be expedited. She added that if I had evidence of wrongdoing, I should submit it in writing with timestamps and supporting documents. I replied with the cloud folder link and a summary of everything Allison had said and done that afternoon. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Marcus. He said Allison was at the mailbox cluster with a folding table, a poster board, and a clipboard. She was collecting signatures for a petition to increase security patrols and posting photos of the blurry footage on the board. He sent me a picture. The poster board had my unit number circled in red marker and the word suspect written underneath in all caps. Allison was standing next to it, smiling, talking to residents as they walked by. I grabbed my phone and headed to the mailboxes. By the time I got there, Allison had collected at least a dozen signatures. She saw me coming and pointed at me while talking to an elderly couple. She said loudly that I was the one under investigation and residents should be careful about leaving valuables near my unit. The couple looked at me and then quickly walked away. I asked Allison what she thought she was doing. She said she was protecting the community and residents had a right to know who was stealing from them. I pulled out my phone and started recording again. Allison immediately raised her voice and said I was harassing her and she would call the police. I said she was welcome to call them because I had plenty of questions for them too. She hesitated, then turned back to the table and shuffled her papers. I asked the residents who were standing there if they had actually seen me steal anything. No one answered. I asked if any of them had reported missing packages. One woman raised her hand and said she had reported a missing package 2 weeks ago. I asked her what was in it. She said it was a book. I asked if it had been found. She said no. I asked if she had any proof it was delivered. She said the tracking said it was delivered to the mailbox cluster. I asked Allison if that package was part of the evidence she was holding. She said it was. I asked to see it. She said the evidence was locked in the clubhouse storage closet and only the board president had access. I asked when the board president would be available. She said he was out of town and would not be back until next week. I asked if she had a key to the storage closet. She said she did not. I asked how she knew the package was in there if she could not access it. She said the board president had confirmed it before he left. I asked for the board president's contact information. Allison said that was confidential. I said I could get it from the management company. She said the management company was not allowed to share board contact information without board approval. I pulled up the HOA bylaws on my phone and read the section that said residents had the right to contact board members directly for dispute resolution. Allison said the bylaws were outdated and the board had passed a new policy last month that restricted direct contact. I asked where that policy was published. She said it was in the minutes. One of the residents standing near the table, a man in his 50s, spoke up. He said he had been at the last board meeting and there was no vote on a contact restriction policy. Allison glared at him and said he must have missed it because it was added during the closed portion of the meeting. The man said there was no closed portion. Allison said he was wrong and the minutes would prove it when they were published. The man shook his head and walked away. 2 other residents followed him. Allison turned back to me and said I was disrupting a community event and she was going to file a harassment complaint. I said she was already filing complaints against me for things I did not do, so one more would not make a difference. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. She said if I did not stop pushing, she would make sure the board voted to fine me for every violation she could find, real or not. She said the fines would stack up faster than I could appeal them, and I would end up with a lien on my property. I asked if she was threatening me. She smiled and said, "I do not make the rules, I enforce them." I walked back to my unit and called Diane at the management company again. She answered on the second ring and said she had just gotten off the phone with the board president. He confirmed that there was no emergency session scheduled and no evidence being held in the storage closet. He also said Allison had been acting outside her authority and the board would be addressing it at the next meeting. I asked when that was. Diane said it was in 2 weeks. I told her I did not have 2 weeks because Allison was actively destroying my reputation and threatening my property. Diane sighed and said the best she could do was send a cease and desist letter to Allison on behalf of the management company, instructing her to stop making public accusations without board authorization. I asked if that would actually stop her. Diane said probably not, but it would create a paper trail. I asked if I could request an emergency audit of the storage closet to see if any packages were actually there. Diane said that required a board vote. I asked how long that would take. She said at least a week, assuming the board president could get a quorum. I hung up and stared at my laptop screen. The cloud folder with my evidence was solid, but it only proved I did not steal anything. It did not prove who did. I needed to find the actual thief, and I had a growing suspicion it was Allison herself. I thought about the way she had deflected every question about the evidence, the way she claimed only the board president had access to the storage closet, the way she had threatened to fine me into oblivion if I kept pushing. She was acting like someone with something to hide. I texted Marcus and asked if he could meet me at the clubhouse after hours. He said he could, but he was not breaking into anything. I told him we were not breaking in, we were just going to look around. He sent back 3 question marks. I told him to trust me and bring his dashcam footage. He agreed. That evening, Marcus and I met outside the clubhouse at 9. The building was locked, but Marcus had a key because he was on the social committee. We went inside and walked to the storage closet near the back hallway. The door was labeled with a small plastic sign that said "Board Use Only" in plain black letters. Marcus tried the handle. It was unlocked. We looked at each other, and I pushed the door open. The closet was small, maybe 6 feet by 8 feet, with metal shelves lining 3 walls. The shelves were packed with boxes, binders, old decorations, and random maintenance supplies. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Marcus did the same. We started scanning the shelves. Most of the boxes were labeled with event names and dates, but there was one box in the corner that had no label. I pulled it down and opened it. Inside were at least a dozen packages. Some were unopened. Some were torn open with contents spilling out. I recognized one of the mailers. It had my neighbor's address printed on the shipping label. I took pictures of everything. Marcus leaned over and said this was insane. I told him to keep looking. On the bottom shelf, I found a plastic bin with a lid. Inside the bin were smaller items, a Bluetooth speaker still in its box, a set of kitchen knives, a phone charger, and a bag of new pool wristbands. The wristbands were bright blue with a white stripe. No readable text. I picked up the bag of wristbands and checked the label. It was addressed to the HOA office, but it was supposed to be distributed at the pool during summer registration. That registration had ended 2 months ago. I asked Marcus if he remembered getting his wristband. He said he did, but he had to pick it up at the office because they said they ran out at the pool. I said they did not run out, someone stole them. We kept digging. On the top shelf, I found a key control clipboard with a plastic sleeve, the same one Allison had been carrying earlier. The clipboard had a log sheet attached, and the log showed sign-outs for the storage closet key. Most of the entries were the board president's initials, but there were 3 entries with Allison's initials, all within the past month. The last entry was dated 2 days ago. I took pictures of every page. Marcus whispered that we needed to leave before someone saw us. I agreed, but I took the bag of wristbands and the key control clipboard with me. Marcus said that was evidence and we should not move it. I said if we left it here, it would disappear by morning. He looked at the box of packages and the bin of stolen items and said we should call the police right now. I said we would, but I wanted to make sure Allison could not destroy the evidence first. We locked the storage closet and left the clubhouse. I went back to my unit and uploaded all the photos to the cloud folder. Then I called the non-emergency police line and explained the situation. The dispatcher asked if I wanted to file a theft report. I said yes. She said an officer would come by within the hour to take a statement. I asked if I could request a specific officer. She said I could request, but there was no guarantee. I gave her my address and waited. The officer arrived 40 minutes later. He was a deputy in his 30s, calm and professional. I showed him the photos on my phone and explained everything Allison had done over the past 2 days. He took notes and asked if I had touched anything in the storage closet. I said I had taken 2 items to preserve them as evidence. He asked to see them. I handed him the bag of wristbands and the key control clipboard. He examined both, then asked if anyone else could verify what I found. I gave him Marcus's contact information. The deputy said he would follow up with Marcus and then contact the management company to request access to the storage closet for an official evidence collection. He said if everything I said checked out, the case would be forwarded to the county prosecutor for review. I asked how long that would take. He said a few days at minimum, maybe a week. I asked if Allison would be notified. He said yes, once the investigation was complete. I asked if there was any way to stop her from retaliating before then. He said I could request a restraining order if I felt threatened, but that required a separate filing. I thanked him and he left. I sat on my couch and stared at the cloud folder on my laptop. I had proof Allison had access to the storage closet. I had proof the stolen items were inside. I had proof she had been lying about the board president being the only one with a key. I had dashcam footage from Marcus showing someone else near the mailboxes. I had my own doorbell footage proving I was not there. I had a receipt mismatch between the delivery logs and the items in the closet. I had the key control clipboard showing Allison's sign-outs. And I had the wristbands, which were supposed to be distributed to residents, but were instead hoarded in a bin. The next morning, I got an email from Diane. The board president had returned early from his trip and was calling an emergency board meeting that evening to address the allegations against Allison. Diane said the meeting was open to residents and I was welcome to attend. She also said the police had contacted her and requested access to the storage closet, which she had granted. The police had already collected the evidence and confirmed that the items matched the descriptions in the theft reports. I forwarded the email to Marcus. He replied immediately and said he would come to the meeting with me. He also said he had reviewed his dashcam footage again and found a clip that clearly showed Allison walking away from the mailboxes carrying a stack of mailers the morning of the so-called theft. He said the timestamp was 10 minutes before the blurry footage she had been using to accuse me. I told him to bring the footage to the meeting. That evening, the clubhouse meeting room was packed. At least 30 residents showed up, which was 3 times the usual attendance. Allison was already at the front table, sitting next to the board president and the treasurer. She had her clipboard and a stack of papers in front of her. When I walked in, she glared at me but did not say anything. Marcus came in right behind me and we sat in the 3rd row. The board president, a man in his 60s named Robert, called the meeting to order. He said the purpose of the meeting was to address allegations of misconduct by a board member and to review evidence related to a theft investigation. He said the meeting was being recorded and residents were allowed to speak during the public comment period. Allison immediately raised her hand and said she wanted to make a statement first. Robert said she would have her turn, but the police report would be read first. Diane stood up and read a summary of the police report. She said officers had recovered stolen packages and items from the clubhouse storage closet, including items that matched descriptions from multiple theft reports filed by residents. She said the key control log showed that only 2 people had accessed the storage closet in the past month, the board president and Allison. She said the board president had been out of town during most of the reported thefts, and his key had been in his possession the entire time. She said Allison had signed out the storage closet key 3 times, including the day before the police search. Allison stood up and shouted that the report was full of lies. She said someone must have forged her signature on the key log and planted the stolen items to frame her. She said the real thief was me, and the board was being manipulated by a criminal. Robert told her to sit down and wait her turn. She refused and said she had a right to defend herself. Robert said she would have that right during the comment period, but she needed to let the meeting proceed. She finally sat down, her face red and her hands shaking. Marcus stood up and asked if he could present additional evidence. Robert said yes. Marcus walked to the front and connected his phone to the projector. The dashcam footage played on the screen. It showed Allison walking from the mailbox cluster toward the clubhouse carrying a stack of mailers. The timestamp was clearly visible in the corner, 7:42 in the morning, 10 minutes before the blurry footage she had been using to accuse me. The room went silent. Allison stared at the screen, her mouth open, then turned to Robert and said the footage was edited and could not be trusted. I stood up and asked if I could respond. Robert nodded. I walked to the front and pulled up the cloud folder on my phone. I connected it to the projector and showed the photos from the storage closet. I showed the box of packages with residents' addresses. I showed the bin of stolen items, including the pool wristbands. I showed the key control clipboard with Allison's initials. Then I pulled up my own doorbell footage showing me arriving home with no packages 20 minutes after the mailbox timestamp. I also showed the delivery logs proving none of the reported stolen packages were addressed to me. I turned to Allison and said, "Your camera does not matter. My minutes are the truth." The room erupted. Residents started shouting questions at Allison. Someone asked why she had stolen from her neighbors. Someone else asked how long this had been going on. Another resident asked if the board was going to press charges. Robert banged his gavel and called for order. He said the board would vote on disciplinary action immediately. Allison stood up again and said the board had no authority to discipline her without a full investigation. Robert said the police had already investigated and the evidence was clear. He said the board had 3 options: censure, suspension, or removal. He called for a vote on removal. The treasurer raised his hand in favor. The secretary raised her hand in favor. Robert raised his hand in favor. Allison was removed from the board by a unanimous vote. Allison grabbed her clipboard and stormed toward the exit. On her way out, she stopped in front of me and said, "I do not make the rules. I enforce them." A woman sitting in the front row, the same tow yard clerk who had explained the paperwork rules to Allison during one of her earlier intimidation attempts, repeated the line back to her in a flat, unimpressed voice. "I do not make the rules, I enforce them." Allison's face went pale. She turned and walked out without another word. Robert announced that the management company would be conducting a full audit of HOA finances and inventory to determine the full extent of the thefts. He also announced that the HOA would be terminating the vendor contract Karen had abused by pressuring staff to print unauthorized notices and access restricted records. He said any resident who had filed a theft report should contact the police to update their statements. Finally, he said Allison was told to stop contacting vendors on behalf of the HOA, and any further contact would be treated as trespassing. The meeting ended 20 minutes later. Marcus and I walked out together. He said he could not believe how fast everything had collapsed once the evidence came out. I said Allison had been sloppy because she thought no one would question her. She had been acting like she was untouchable for so long that she forgot people could fight back. The next day, I got a call from the county prosecutor's office. They said Allison had been charged with theft and abuse of authority. The charges carried a potential fine and probation, but no jail time unless she had prior offenses. I asked if I needed to testify. The prosecutor said probably not because the evidence was strong enough without witness testimony. I thanked her and hung up. A week later, the management company sent an email to all residents summarizing the investigation. The email confirmed that Allison had stolen packages, clubhouse supplies, and pool wristbands over a 3-month period. The total value of the stolen items was estimated at over $2,000. The email also confirmed that the HOA had reimbursed residents for their losses and had implemented new key control procedures to prevent future thefts. Allison's name was not mentioned, but everyone knew who it was. Marcus texted me and said he heard Allison had moved out of Lakeview Heights. I said I had heard the same thing. He said good riddance. I agreed. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding my reputation in the neighborhood. I attended a community barbecue and talked to residents who had signed Allison's petition. Most of them apologized and said they had been manipulated. I told them it was fine and I understood. One woman said she had always thought Allison was too aggressive but had been afraid to say anything. I told her she was not alone. The board president asked me if I wanted to run for the open vice president seat. I said no. I had spent enough time dealing with HOA drama and I was ready to go back to my quiet life as a systems analyst. He said he understood and thanked me for standing up to Allison. He said the neighborhood was better off without her. I never saw Allison again. I heard she tried to appeal the charges, but the evidence was overwhelming. The last I heard, she was living in a different part of Omaha and was banned from serving on any HOA board in the county. I did not feel sorry for her. She had tried to destroy my life to cover up her own crimes, and she had gotten exactly what she deserved. Looking back, I realized the whole thing had started because someone posted a blurry clip and Karen insisted it was me without letting anyone zoom in. That one moment of arrogance had set off a chain reaction that exposed her thefts, destroyed her authority, and ended her time at Lakeview Heights. If she had just left me alone, she might have gotten away with it for months or even years. Instead, she picked a fight with someone who knew how to document everything and was not afraid to push back. The key control clipboard she refused to let anyone read became the smoking gun. The pool wristbands she hoarded instead of distributing became the proof of her pattern. The dashcam footage Marcus captured became the timeline that destroyed her alibi. And the witness statement that was recorded calmly and could not be twisted became the final nail in her defense. I learned that HOA drama is exhausting, but it is also predictable. People like Allison thrive on intimidation and confusion. They stack rules and deadlines and threats until you feel overwhelmed and give up. But if you stay calm, document everything, and refuse to be bullied, they fall apart. Their authority is only as strong as your willingness to accept it. The moment you challenge them with facts and witnesses and evidence, they have nothing left. The neighborhood settled back into its normal routine. The new vice president was a retired teacher who actually read the bylaws and followed them. The management company updated the portal so violations were posted immediately and residents could track appeals in real time. The storage closet got a new lock and a sign-in sheet that required 2 signatures for access. And the mailbox cluster got a new security camera with a higher resolution, so blurry footage could never be weaponized again. I kept my cloud folder as a backup, just in case. I also kept the receipt mismatch and the keylog photos as reminders of how close I had come to being destroyed by a lie. Every time I walked past the clubhouse, I thought about that night in the storage closet and the moment I realized Allison was the thief. It was the kind of moment you do not forget, the kind that changes how you see people and how you handle conflict. Marcus and I became friends after that. We started meeting for coffee every few weeks and swapping stories about the neighborhood. He told me he had been documenting HOA violations for years because he did not trust the board. I told him his paranoia had saved me. He laughed and said paranoia was just preparation for people like Allison. The pool wristbands got redistributed the following summer. The board announced that residents could pick them up at the office during registration, and this time they actually had enough. I got mine on the first day and wore it every time I went to the pool. It felt like a small victory, a reminder that I had fought back and won. I never forgot the way Allison looked when the dashcam footage played on the projector. The way her face went from smug to panicked in less than 5 seconds. The way she tried to claim it was edited even though everyone could see it was real. The way she grabbed her clipboard and stormed out, defeated and humiliated. It was the most satisfying moment of the entire ordeal, and it was worth every stressful minute that came before it. The tow threat never materialized. The yellow notice on my car was voided by the management company, and I never heard about it again. The guest parking violation was marked as an error in the system, and the board sent an apology email. I did not respond. I did not need an apology. I just needed them to stop harassing me, and they did. The lawsuit never happened either. The prosecutor said Allison had agreed to a plea deal that included restitution, probation, and community service. She was banned from holding any HOA position for 10 years and had to complete an ethics course. I thought it was a light sentence, but the prosecutor said it was the best they could do without taking it to trial. I accepted it and moved on. I spent the rest of that year focusing on work and avoiding HOA drama. I attended exactly one board meeting, the one where they voted on the new key control procedures, and then I stopped going. I paid my dues on time, followed the rules, and kept to myself. It was exactly the quiet life I wanted when I moved to Lakeview Heights, and I was determined to keep it that way. The neighborhood app stayed active, but the tone changed. People stopped posting blurry accusations and started posting helpful information. Someone started a thread about package theft prevention tips. Someone else started a thread about how to request records from the board. The culture shifted from fear and paranoia to collaboration and transparency. It was not perfect, but it was better. I still think about Allison sometimes. I wonder if she learned anything from what happened or if she just blames everyone else. I wonder if she is stealing from her new neighbors or if the charges scared her straight. I wonder if she ever thinks about the moment her lies caught up with her and how fast her authority crumbled. I will never know, and I am okay with that. What I do know is that standing up to her was the right choice. It was hard and stressful and risky, but it was worth it. I cleared my name, I exposed a thief, I protected my neighbors, and I proved that HOA boards are not untouchable. They are just people with clipboards and attitudes, and when you challenge them with facts and evidence, they fall apart like everyone else. Until the next HOA story, take care, and I will see you soon.